So welcome everybody to number 134 of the Circle of Wine Writers Let's Talk series. And today's topic is let's talk about Sekt-Appeal, reviving the luxury spirit of German fizz with Nicole Wolbers. I'd like to extend a welcome to members that are here for the first time and also to those non-members. And just to give you a little bit of background, the Circle of Wine Writers was founded in 1960 in the UK, but today we've spread our wings and we now have over 270 members across the world, combining or comprising of wine writers, educators, broadcasters, and other professional communicators. And we are split between 50-50 between the UK and overseas. You can find out more information about the Circle on our website, and there's also the details of how you can join online. I'd now like to hand over to Helen Savage, who will introduce Nicole, our speaker today. And over to you, Helen.
Thank you ever so much, Andrea. I'm really excited to welcome Nicole. Nobody knows more about Sekt than she does. She was originally a textile engineer and then became a wine writer, educator, and particularly a sparkling wine expert, developing her passion actually not in Germany, where she is now. She's speaking from Potsdam, her home, but from California, where she got her WSET diploma. And she went on to do wonderful things all around sparkling wine. She runs a platform called Schaumwein Magazine. I can't pronounce German very well, which
Perfect.
is all about dedicating people towards the knowledge of the quality explosion of German Sekt today. And most impressively, recently she was awarded the title of the first ever Sekt ambassador for the Sektmacher organization. So we're in the safest and most exciting of hands. And she's going to take us on a journey. I'm not going to say very much about that because you've heard a little bit about it already, but we're going to go from the 18th century and some of the famous names that from Germany founded champagne houses. Just think Krug, Tétanger, Mumm, Bollinger. And then to the rather sadder times when the reputation of Sekt fell down a bit. And the only anecdote I would like to share is that in 1990, I had to go to a conference just outside Dresden after the fall of the Berlin Wall and had a day off. So went to the vineyards of Sachsen and was there to see the first ever delivery of Spanish base wine for a winery which was churning out Sekt for the Russian market through the continuous method. Things have improved, and Nicole is going to tell us just how much they've improved, and it's over to you.
Yes, thank you so much from my side and for the lovely introduction. Yeah, the topic today is not really about the numbers and figures because the premium Sekt, for example, Winzer Sekt, is really a small market. It's really a niche. And so it doesn't make really sense to go into the export markets because very few export, mainly they do it by themselves. And so I want to focus more on the rise and the downfall and what kind of energy is behind and the spirit behind the real good German Sekt because there's so much going on at the moment. And so I'm happy to have you all here to join me. And I have chosen the title because Sekt-Appeal is something, it can be appealing in a positive way, but also a negative way. And today is the focus really on the positive image. And we will experience how reviving the luxury spirit of Germany Fizz is continuing. So I was thinking before I would like to ask you maybe to write a few notes in the chat to see what are you thinking about the term Sekt, maybe in 3 words, and how easy was it for you, because you're mainly maybe located in the US or in the UK, to find a good German Sekt, and especially of interest the price point. So, but I will continue then in the meantime to go into the history. And as we all know, Germans are very closely tied with the Champagne region. So here we have a picture of the Champagne and we have one of the Mainz. And it all started in the 18th, 19th centuries where many Germans were going into champagne. They were really having, there were some leading in the cellar, some even in the maisons. So we have an example like Heidsieck or Kessler, which is very important for the German industry. But we have all the names, Bollinger, Krug, Röderer, Tattinger. They all really had the interest, and they all gained knowledges and special position within the champagne industry. And I think for the Germans was mainly important that those who came back transferred the knowledge and the business they had to Germany. And Georg Christian Kessler was leaving Veuve Clicquot and then founded the first Sektkellerei in Germany, in Esslingen in the south. So he produces then the first sect officially with the traditional method, which is very interesting. Mentioning sparkling wine in Germany was a bit beforehand, but like maybe in Limoux, every region had its sparkling wine somehow. So I think that really doesn't matter. But we are now in the glamorous time, in the glamorous phase. So many exciting things happened, actually. So I had been in the Sektbörse in Mainz, in this castle and there was a saying that in 1792, a general was there, a French general, and he would love to enjoy a glass of champagne, and he did so. And he was kind of really quoted that saying, the effervescence of this delicious wine is entirely in keeping with the French spirit. So he was really happy with that, what he had inside the glass. But finding out later that it was a German experimental or kind of first sparkling wine made in the electoral wineries, he was very astonished, but it really tells about how the quality must have been already. And one of the milestones was really the triumph in the World Exhibition in Paris, where Rheingold Sekt from the Rheingau won the gold medal. And in this time, it was a 100% Riesling made in the traditional method. So it really showed how proud and how good the quality must have been, because seeing on the winery lists or a restaurant wine list, Riesling Sekt was always very high priced next to champagne. So they had the same level. And if you see this little label in the middle, and I translated, it says in the first top row, an alternative for the finest champagne. So they were really proud really to be on par with the French producer. And it's interesting that really ended up in a sect mania, you can say. So Germans were really going bubbly, and so we have a long tradition in that, drinking a lot of sparkling wine. And but this really changed then, that the exclusive luxury product, maybe for the aristocracy, turned into a status symbol for the rising middle classes. So for the Bohemians, for example. So it was really the choice of drink, at the time and in the decades after, actually. And just to give some numbers, 100 million bottles already drunk in the 1900s. And Berlin was not only a hotspot for the consumption because of culture and all the industry at the time there, but also a kind of production site. So Kupferberg from the Rheingau had huge storage facilities there, and the Sektkellerei Höhl was in the south part. Actually, it's the eastern part of Berlin, but southeast, which this winery doesn't exist anymore. But Schloss Vaux, maybe some of you know this Sektkellerei, or Sektmanufaktur, how they call themselves, was founded by business people from Berlin, because they really thought that is now the fanciest thing, and we have to get involved into as well. So they started their Sektkellerei in Lothringen, Vaux, which had been German at the time. So, and so we had over 100 Sektkellereien throughout Germany, in the east, in the west, and the south. So it was really amazing what was going on. And the 15 biggest then founded the first organization, called themselves Syndikat der Schaumweinfabrikanten. And it was really amazing that the size of the Sekt-Kellereien had been so stable until the 1930s. And Sekt itself, a word, has gained some common recognition, though it still was on the clamorous side at the time. But nevertheless, it is a term which has weathered the ups and downs of the history, really. It is the saying that the actor Ludwig de Vrillion played in Shakespeare the Falstaff and was citing "Give me a cup of Sekt grog," and returning to his favorite wine bar in Berlin, he was replaying it, so reciting it, and the server knew that he loved champagne, so he became a glass of champagne, so something sparkling. And from then on, it said that Sekt was a common word for sparkling wine in the class. So because it got more established, also the association changed the names from Schaumwein, which is just a generic word for sparkling wine, to the name Sekt-Kellereien. And this association still exists. So it's still are the biggest producers in this kind of organization. And nevertheless, Sekt is still used as an all-catching phrase for many German sparkling wines, or even if you have a non-alcoholic alternative sparkling, it is called non-alcoholic Sekt. So it's really difficult. But interesting is that Kaiser Wilhelm was really a fan of Sekt and pushed really the production on. So he really was making everything what was possible. But then we had the time where the conflict were rising. So we were in wartime, and they needed money, the government, to finance the fleet. And so why not take the lovely product all Germans love and put a Sekt tax on it? So that's why what then started. And even nowadays, we still have it. So it's up today, it's €1.02 per bottle. And it is extremely lucrative for the government, and there were some efforts to get rid of it. But of course, no government wants to lose. For example, in 2025, we had 325 million euros coming in just from the Sekt tax. So why should I spend that? So yes, and then there was another conflict because Germans sold very often their Schaumwein German champagne. So there was a treaty afterwards to protect champagne name, which changed it too. And so finally, the Sekt, which was commonly used, got really officially recognized as a term. And at that time, it was traditional method only. And it's also important to highlight that Sekt was a monopoly, and it could only be sold sold by the Sekt-Kellereien. So that was something really, really important, and that really suppressed the involvement of small wineries doing and selling sparkling wine. Nevertheless, we had the conflict side, but also this kind of conflict over the wars really meant some innovation. So it's really interesting how they shaped the marketing as well. So in the beginning, because people had no money, but still loved to get some luxury in their class. So Henkel, for example, introduced the Piccolo, so the really small bottle size. And they targeted really new markets as well, or consumers, that were the women. So because they could put it also in the handbag. So it was a very handy format. And you could, two people share at least a sip, and have a toast to each other. So it was really an extremely successful invention. And visibility and branding really took on new ways. And for example, Rotkäppchen, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. It was Kloss and Förster beforehand. They had a dispute about the red foil, about the title Monopol. They had a brand called Monopol, but Heidsieck Monopol won the legal battle. And so they decide, okay, what can we do? So we do the red foil, which is still a signature. You see the bottle with red foil, immediately. And very fashionable was the poster in the Art Deco style to submit some lifestyle. And what's really interesting, the start of neuroscience, which was really new in the 20s, right in the middle of Berlin, Kupferberg installed 2,600 light bulbs, and they really mirrored the pouring of sparkling wine into a glass. So they were really the bulbs imitating the bubbles going into the glass. So that was extremely success, and it is said that they increased their sales by 20% at that time. So it meant also Sekt is something which isn't standing still, so it's always moving on. And I think the most severe change was really the production method. Chamat method was around for already long, invented in France. And yeah, in contrast to the champagne or champenoise, which decided we don't take on this new format. So we stick with the traditional bottle. The big Sekt-Kellereien decide, okay, we go for the new method. It's much faster, it's cheaper, so we can really produce more cost efficiently. And that really turned Sekt from the luxury or special product into the mass production. You know, now it was available for all and not for the Kaiser. And yeah, over 95% of German Sekt is now produced with this method. So that was the consequence, and still is a really difficult topic. We had heard about the downfall, especially combined with this change of production method. So it is really a cheap commodity nowadays, and but we were slowly getting up again. So, and we must be thankful the EU to really override the monopole status. So, you know, they really forced Germany, and that it is not equal to leave only the Sekt-Kellereien, the production of Sekt, so that the small wineries can do it by themselves, and then they can sell it by themselves. And that's where was the start of the birth time of Winzer Sekt, actually. So it was the first time that they could really sell it. And this, I think, inspired a group of really ambitious Sekt makers as well in the 1980s to do this, to found their own association dedicated only to traditional sparkling wine. And they called it Verband der traditionellen klassischen Flaschengärer, a word which was really crazy. Nobody really can pronounce. And they relaunched, you see, the time gap. Almost 20 years later, they really took on, you know, to start again. And the first thing they did, we need to change this name. It's a horrible name. Okay, I see, that's lovely. And so they relaunched it to the Verband Traditioneller Sektmacher, which means Organization Traditional Sekt Producer. So it's much easier to communicate, you know, you don't have this knot in your tongue. And which was really another push was in 21, that the VDP, the Prädikatsweingüter, really thought, okay, we have to take on Sekt as well. We have a good classification for still ones, but we have to move on with our Sekt as well. And here I have a little question as well. Can you tell the quality level? Sorting the bottles, and please write your answer in the chat. Can you see really from the packaging what kind of quality you have in front of you? Because that's another topic. And I will go later in the questions, on question time, we can talk about it a bit. And because here I must just sneak in, it was a problem that a few Sekt makers were saying, we want to get rid of this foil. It's not environmental friendly, and it's not necessary for the sparkling wine. But the big group of Sekt-Kellereien that, oh no, it is very important, you know, it's that what makes the luxury of Sekt overall, and it is necessary because it protects the wine inside. But finally they lost, and there was an agreement that nowadays everyone can choose with or without the foil. But you could see there was a positioning of the quantity Sekt to be more exclusive luxury in this style. So if they have been told, okay, we have to sell it without, maybe some would say, oh no, maybe not. Yes. The German sect classification is not really easy. I try to put it in a pyramid, and yeah, I focus more on Qualitätsschaumwein, BA, Winzer Sekt, and Cremant. But just short, we have at the really low bottom Schaumweine and Perlweine, which means Perlweine are more the Frisante styles or low pressure. And it's more following the Prosecco Frisante in a way, while Schaumweine are the wines where the grapes are sourced from all over the place and in Europe. And you can use all production methods to do that. And usually they have a minimum of 3 bars. Pet nut I put in because it's not really in the exact classification, but in Germany it can be sometimes Perlwein and sometimes Schaumwein. So depending on the bar. So if you have a low pressure under 2.5, then it's a Perlwein. And if you have over 3, then it's a Schaumwein. So that's what a little bit of a mix. More interesting it gets with the Qualitätsschaumwein and Deutscher Sekt, but nevertheless here it is for Qualitätsschaumwein you can source it from all over the EU again, and that's a major category for the quantity produced, tank method produced wines. And Deutscher Sekt, like it said, must be 100% German grapes. And in this category, you also find sometimes outstanding Sekt produced, but they don't fit in all the other categories. Maybe they're using a grape variety which is not allowed in one wine region, or they're doing a cuvée from different wine regions. So it's not easy. And if we move on to the Winzer Sekt, to the Sekt BA. So BA means from one of the designated wine regions. We have 13. Then it's clear that it must be the grapes must be from that wine region. So you have a more security, what kind of grapes you have inside. Vintage variety can be stated, but all styles in sweetness levels are allowed, and also the production method. So here you still can find tank, transfer, and a traditional method. And moving up the ladder is then the Winzer Sekt. The idea was really to distinguish it from all the rest of it. And it is a state fruit, and you have traditional method, but you can use transfer depending on the bottle sizes. But you have all sweetness levels as well, and producer, variety, and vintage must be clearly stated if 85% of it is contained, and it starts with 9 months on the lease, actually. And Winzer Sekt is unfortunately a name you seldom see on bottles, and it's not really a favorite of the producers themselves. Even they created it to have something maybe similar to champagne, but they find it's not sexy enough. It's more like a sweaty, it sounds like work. And I always tell them, we never push this word, because champagne, if you translate it, it means field. So it's not really better, but it has regained some kind of market and some kind of luxury. So we could maybe have done this with Winzer Sekt as well. Would have been easier nowadays. But really on the top of the German classification is Cremant, and it always have to come with one of the wine growing regions, like Cremant Pfalz. And this is not really very well known, even within Germany. So there are lots of arguing about it. Does it make sense in the German classification or not? But this is really clearly the category where you have the highest requirements, because it follows closely the Cremant EU regulations. So you have handcrafted whole cluster pressing for white grapes, interestingly, even if you can produce rosé. You have traditional method, 9 months lease aging. Mosel does 12. And with the residual sugar, it really goes only until 20 grams per liter. Pfalz even just 15 grams per liter. So it's really kind of a mixed package we have here in the German classification, and it really all depends also in which wine regions you are. Then you have different kind of requirements for the grape variety you can use. a few things about the figures. So German sparkling wine industry, like I already mentioned. Yeah, we have 13 wine growing regions, and new ones are emerging, but they must be then on the lowest level, actually, if they do a German sect. And yeah, like I said, the varieties change a lot depending on what is regulated there. And we have 1,067 producers in the category. But if you see the numbers, we have a total production of 330 million bottles. But if you see that 246 are coming from the biggest ones, that's quite shocking. And you see that if you narrow further down, that roughly 5 million bottles are Winzer Sekt or Sekt and 12 Sekt BR, then we talk about 2 to 3, 4% of the production side within Germany. And I tried to make a sheet because there are not many information available, because like the word Sekt, we have a all jump in category, Schaumweine, so which is registered or counted, then even with cover, whatever's coming in Cremant. So it's really difficult to narrow down the figures for each category like Cremant or Winzer Sekt. So some are kind of estimates or kind of estimates numbers. So you see Winzer Sekt is really small percentage and Cremant even lower, but both categories are growing within. If we take a look at the market, it's like we all know that sparkling wine market is one of the most stable ones at the moment, slightly increasing in some parts of the world, and that is a mistake until the growth is estimated to be almost 5% until 2028. Sorry about that. So it's really still slowly increasing. And Europe alone produces, almost 80% of the market share worldwide production. What is really interesting to compare, we take the second place in production of sparkling wines behind Prosecco. And not closely followed, but Champagne really follows. And then we only export really 14%, which is then mainly the volume Sekt. And so there are not really numbers available how much the Winzer Sekt would be. So because everyone does it on their own, wineries who can afford it. And very major is the price and perception gap, really. We are the world champions. Since many, many years, I remember we drink the most sparkling wines in the world per capita. And in 2025, it was still 3.5 liter a year from people up 16 years consumption. And there was a research done by Hochschule Geisenheim that 32% of Germans enjoy 1 to 3 times a Sekt, which is quite interesting. Wines were really falling down, but Sekt really remained quite well. And if you take a look at the average price in the markets, it's a mixed calculation because it's not so easy. You see German Sekt is really very low priced. And Prosecco, DOCG mixed is with 7.5 euro and Champagne 39. Yeah, you see that Sekt Austria is doing a good job, starting with roughly 14 euros, which is really, really good. So, but if you really take a look closer into the average price, for example, by the Sekt had been entered in a competition in Germany, which is the only really bigger one, Sekt price. The average price was 19.4 euros, which I thought is really good. So I was really surprised to see that it's going up, actually. Varieties, yes, we have a potpourri, but I would say it narrows down to a few. Riesling, of course, is still ahead, and I still read from some trade magazines that German Sekt is Riesling with high acidity and it's more blunt fruity. But I think that has changed so much. Even Riesling is diversity and has potential for new expressions. And 2018 were the registered Sekt-BA all Riesling, so it's still the leading grape variety for this. And in the Sekt price again, there were almost 100 bottles Riesling Sekt, and what really was nice, it is increasing in the range in the category of over 36 months on lease. And nevertheless, you can distinguish it in young and fresh, so with maybe stainless steel aging, but then you have this new range of more subtle textured softness, where the wineries work with oak, maybe malolactic fermentation to suppress a bit the Riesling aromatics, and longer lease aging. It's very interesting how this mix is evolving. And nowadays, what's really makes a lot of fun is going into the mature complex. Riesling Sekt is with extended lease aging. So it's a extremely fine balance of oxalitic notes underlying the structure of Riesling. And I think that's really wonderful. For example, Weingut Bamberger makes a Dekade 10 years old. Or I have Odinstal. It's also sold only in Magnum. It's also 100% Riesling, 10 years plus. So it's worth to look in this kind of category, but production numbers are really low. Pinot power is really true. Pinot, we call it in Germany Spätburgunder. It's really an ever-increasing variety in all senses. It's really trendy for Blanc de Noir or Rosé, and yes, it really shows very good potential in cuvées as well. And we have wine regions like Assmannshausen, where traditionally more Rot Sekt had been produced, but unfortunately it's really declining. They're just FB Schönleber, for example, makes a really lovely one. And I was thinking maybe that could rival or substitute a bit the Australian sparkling Shiraz, because this is traditional method done, and it would worth maybe a pairing. So highly recommended to take a look in this. And this is the biggest challenge for Riesling, actually. It's Chardonnay. It's kind of a new variety in Germany, 91. No, it's okay, 20 plus years old already, but it's an ever-growing variety. So it really is appreciated for its versatility, but also that it gets this more subtleness and more, I would say, autolytic character. Some people really, yeah, you must say, see in Champagne what Riesling cannot offer in that sense and shouldn't offer in a way because it's unique. And also it's slowly in the rise, Weißburgunder, Pinot Blanc, and it really shows great examples at the moment. But it's still, yeah, not always a favorite. It's mainly found in cuvées, actually. And so it's interesting to see where the way is going further. And just to highlight, Blanc de Blanc in Germany is completely undefined. So it can be written with S or without. And you can find 100% Chardonnay or 100% Pinot Blanc, but as well Auxerrois and the Cuvée. So it's all Blanc de Blanc, just to remind you. And just as a side note, aromatics still are here, but losing ground, I must say. And many people really favor the Burgundy varieties or Riesling. You see really that it's a focus on the 4 grape varieties. I didn't mention Meunier because it's not so visible, but it's taking off slowly too, because it really copes quite well with the changes in the vineyards. Internationally, German Sekt, yes, it's a slow development, like I said. So Tom Stevenson even said in his guide in 2016, German Pinot Noir Rosé Sekt was quite exceptional and could win over skepticism. And it bridges the gap between aromatic sparkling wines and classic Brit style fizz. So since then, little international visibility has been achieved. It's more recently, I must admit, that Jancis Robinson, where Paula Ridoris is reporting from Germany, said that German sparkling wine has spent the last decade undergoing notable developments in its upper echelons. And yeah, she's following it closely too, and you can really see that. And I was writing for a drink magazine about Riesling as potential in aging for Sekt, and I really said it's something very special for the German wine industry, and it could be maybe some kind of a uniqueness to stand out compared to Burgundy varieties. But we have lots of discussion going on. Is Riesling really good for high-end sparkling wines or not? And it all depends to the winemakers. And I find there are really excellent examples out there. And yeah, and Kriebel, Master of Wine, yeah, she has been following Sekt so closely over the times, and she states again, it's a small group of producers truly master this today. The perception has changed that it starts inequality in the vineyard. So, and newcomers are really joining now the groups of established good winemakers like Mathieu Kaufmann from Reichsbad, from Buhl, who started this too. And it's getting more and more. It's really interesting to see with how much passion they are going in. And as a jury member of many competitions around, there's little Sekt really visible in these competitions, but it shows again that they are able to compete. And at the IVSC in 2022, there was Heinz Wagner from the south in Baden really doing quite well and were recommended as an award-winning wine to try. And in the CMB, the Fluxusbrut Natur from Weingut Bergdorf won a Grand Boat. So I think when the Sektmacher or the winemakers really try to compete or showcase their wines, they are really having a good chance to having good results. Reviving the luxury fizz. So we have to go to the two organizations which are really shaping a bit the wine scene. And the first of all is the Sektmacher. Here you see the emblem with the traditional Sektmacher bottles. And like I said, they had a fresh restart in 2019, doing with the renaming, but also going more outside to encourage other winemakers here in Germany to join them. So nowadays there are 44 members and it's increasing. Interest is growing. They have a lot of application at the moment, but they have to run through an application process, which is not so easy. So you have to wait for 1-2 years. And Sekthaus Raumland was the first one to be the Sektkellerei, the first Sektkellerei being part of the VDP group. That was an amazing step because he was one of the founders of the Sektmacher organization. So it was like, okay, he's connecting now maybe the two organizations in a way. And yeah, in 2026, the first Sekt ambassador was announced. It was my personality. So I'm really happy to share my views here. And very recommended is, or highly recommended is the Sektbörse every year in April. So you have the chance to see all the producers there, as well as the VDP producers at the Weinbörse, at this annual wine fair. Yeah, the Sektmacher Sekt, they have a different approach, I must say. They see the whole winery, the whole production site. So they check if you have more than 10% of Sekt in your range, which is sweeter than 15 grams per liter. So it's kind of a no-go. So they really want to encourage to produce more serious sparkling wines. And they also kind of give regulations on minimum lease aging, which is 9 months, and the tirage, for example, in the 1st of January. And what is really good, they say, okay, we focus on the grape varieties which are located in your area. For example, if you're in an area with Scheurebe, for example, then you can produce this base Sektmacher Sekt from it. But then we move up. That's the latest edition with 36 months on it is the reserve, where they have narrowed down the regulations. It must be Brit or up to Brit Natur. hand harvest, whole cluster pressing. So here it's really that they're really increasing the quality level, really obvious in your class. And also they say, okay, here we don't play around with Scheurebe anymore. Here we really go for the grape varieties, which we think are the best ones. I think they're really one of the driver for top tier German Fizz, but still the volumes are very low to keep tiny to keep the visibility low, well, or to rise it. The next player is really the VDP Sekt. They are more codifying German Sekt, I must say. Having for so long time Sekt just kind of lingering around, and the qualities I must say honestly, were very decent. And so it was good that they took on, because I was thinking if you have high-end still wine, so it should match with the Sekt actually. So, and it is the traditional bottle fermentation only, even for the entry level, the VDP Sekt, which is here 15 months, if it's vintage 24. And the prestige is the same as the Sektmacher Reserve. You have them 36 months on these. So here you rely more the regulations of the VDPs themselves in the regions, in the chapters, that you can use the grape varieties which are available there. And it is very interesting, the seal you get by tastings of the committee, of the tasting committee created by the VDP itself. So you have different levels. For the VDP Sekt Prestige, it's a national committee, and otherwise there are kind of a selection of winemakers doing that for the Sekt. So it's voluntary. I think that's the point you can argue about, and it's not a final, so it's still in the process. So they're still moving on, because at the moment you have lots of Sekt sold which are not in the classification, but it's bread and butter, you are selling, and so there are discussions how to change this too, to integrate this kind of Sekt which is available. But I think the VDP sends a very strong signal outside. And finally, reviving the luxury spirit of German Fizz. So it's a question, what's the next? So I think many steps are laid. The foundation maybe is late. And as we have seen, it's very slow moving process, because there's no support from the big industry or from the German wine organizations, the other ones overall for Sekt. So we have a little bit David versus Goliath, where you have small quality-driven producers challenging the mass image. And that was really the goal, to keep the word Sekt for the Sektmacher. They said, no, we don't want to give them the name Sekt, which has such a standing, or had such a standing and so reputative. And there were lots of thinking, should we go maybe like South Africa Cup Classic, or some Sekt Alemannia or something like this. But in the end, I think that was a good decision to stick with this and just really profile it better. And so they're trying even to push it more from this kind of Fizz luxury movement to the handcrafted Sekt in the international fine wine stages. And of course, being no copy and growing recognition amongst the wineries always displays it, that there's more and more higher standing Sekt coming out of Germany, and low visibility, tiny volumes. Okay, VDP and Sektmacher are the signature organizations highlighting this, but communication is still very in a niche, and so it's a lot of things to do, and the price positioning gap is a demanding one too. So limited a bit artisanal Sekt requires new strategies, and that's maybe something the industry needs to go on in a whole, so that you have trade, gastronomy, and consumers. So the questions for me are really, can a Riesling Sekt be a standalone signature Sekt, or would it be maybe an option to have a pyramid for all German Sekt, like the Austrian did? But clear is for sure that there must be an opening to international markets and more communication, which is much broader about the quality. And I think German Sekt must adjust, and just as it did in Paris in 1867. Okay, time is over. So thank you so much. I had to run a bit through because it's a really huge topic. So thanks again for the attention.
Thank you, Nicole. And just to say, our apologies that I wasn't on at the beginning, but thanks to Helen for doing the introductions. So I think that's a fantastically interesting and in-depth presentation. Thank you, Nicole, so much. I think what you've shown is that the complexity and nuance of Sekt is indeed great and is in line with the Germanic tradition of logic overload to the point of confusion, perhaps. So there's been a number of questions, quite a lot of comments as well, which I will now begin to go through that are on the chat. But I know that you put up your first question to us, which was about the 3 bottles.
Exactly.
And whether we could discern from that which quality is which. So if you want to bring that slide back up, and then we can ask people to put in the chat. We need to give everyone 3 options. So you need to tell us which categories we're looking at. Are we looking at Sekt Matcha, VDP Sekt, Winzer Sekt, Cremant, Pearl Wine, or any other answer or combination of the above? So if you bring up can you put up your page again?
Just to say, Dominic, Nicole had a bit of difficulty getting it up at some point, so it might be best just to run through the questions while she's trying to do that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the first question specifically was from Havard Flatland about the alcohol levels for the various categories of Sekt. So you gave us quite a lot of detail around lees aging requirements, methods of production, and so on. But do they each have a minimum alcohol threshold?
They do, and actually it's varies a bit depending on the categories. For example, Deutscher Schaumwein is 90.5, and before you have the second fermentation, and Deutscher Sekt BA, for example, has 10%. And Winzer Sekt Cremant is the same, so with 10 before you go through the second fermentation.
Okay. And Alicia Hansel had a question about the minimum pressure requirement for Cremant.
Oh, it sticks with the 3.5, so it's really the same.
So in line with the EU
exactly.
requirements for Cremant.
Follow really the EU regulations in this case. Yeah.
Okay. And then Havard was also asking about whether you can contract out the terroirage, second fermentation, riddling, and disgorgement and still make Winzer Sekt. So if you want to call your product Winzer Sekt, do you have to do all the method of production steps yourself, or can you contract out the second part of it from making it into a sparkling wine?
You can do that, actually. You can do that, and you can also have maybe a filling company coming, do the riddling thing, and
the dosage.
Yes, I don't know how their machines are called.
Disgorgement and dosage.
But there's this lineup, of the machine. So many wineries, for example, near France, they have a French company coming over with their whole production lineup, and then you can do the riddling and everything with this machine. So you can really do that you produce your base wines, this is the main point, and then you give it to someone else. For example, Raumland has a huge, the word is gone. He's doing the Sekt makings and, for people. So, yeah.
Okay. And then Peter Lehman Larson asked, when was Cremant BA introduced as a category? When was it created for German? Presumably, it would have hung on the back of the EU wine rules, which allowed for any country to register a Cremant.
Exactly, that's the point. But it got kind of lost, and I grew up in the Mosel region, so we always near Luxembourg. Cremant was always part of German Sekt at my place, but it was never really a topic for the rest of Germany. And so it has a long tradition in Germany, and we all know how it started with the Cremant being able to be produced in Europe. And I think now that Cremant is such a top performing category within the sparkling wine, it gets more interesting for many German winemakers as well, especially if they're producing maybe just one sect or two, because Cremant sells itself. It sounds French, it sounds like lifestyle, it has a quality which is already set up. So it's extremely interesting.
And Anne-Wies van Ossen had a question, two questions, in fact. And I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and ask your first and your second questions in the chat.
I forgot my question, sorry.
Okay.
I don't
So
have
your
them in
first
front of me.
question was about quality levels and BDP.
Because you asked the three bottles. What would you say about the quality? What one would you choose?
Exactly.
But I didn't see I think VDP is very important now on the bottles of German Sekt.
Sorry, I have here. Can you see now the bottles?
Yeah,
we can see that now. So that's great.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So if you want to give us the three answers, but not in the right order.
Not in the right order. Okay. Yeah. One of them is really a quantity sparkling wine, tank method, and the other one is a VDP Prestige, also VDP Sekt Prestige, and the other one is as well a VDP Sekt.
Okay, so we've got three different quality levels: a Cremant, a Sekt, and a Prestige Sekt. So
it's not a Cremant, it's an average sparkling wine from Germany. So it's a tank method wine here.
A tank method, but not a Cremant. Okay, sorry. Okay,
but Nicole, I think a problem for the German Sekt is the diversity in names and layers and names. Because I was at Roodkapje some 10 years ago, and I learned about Flaschische Gäring und Klassische Flaschgärung. That's also different. So there are so many different names and labels and laws. So this is, I think, the biggest problem for German Sekt.
It is. Because it's all over the place. You can play with it. And I really think it's annoying that Flaschengärung means bottle fermented, but it's for many people, if they read it, they say, oh, this is a traditional bottle, with the riddling done by Giro Palette or by hand.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really displayed that it's a transfer method. It doesn't sound nice on the bottle anyway, but some wineries really not only Roodkapje, but keeps themselves the option in maybe some years. Okay, we need to do it more in the transfer method. So they're just writing Flaschengärung by any chance. Like they all use Brut, never mind it's really dry or 12%.
Yeah.
So it's really, you still don't know what you have in the bottle, really.
Yeah, but it should be good for German Sekt to have quite strict names, like you know what you get when you see this bottle. So there are so many different words on the bottles. That's a problem, I think, for German Sekt to sell.
Yeah, I think the better winemakers are starting now to write more information on the back label, which I really appreciate, so that you can see the difference. Or with the Sektmacher on BDP, you have the sticker on the bottles, which helps a bit too. But otherwise, it's really a complete guess, And people are wondering, why should I pay 15 euros for the Sekt when I can get it for 5? So what is the difference? And I think that's a really big problem, that the shaping of the industry is not kind of regulated by the wine industry itself. It's really done by ambitious people doing it. And that's
like you, thank you very much for explaining all those things to us.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome. If I give a talk for the Wine Academic in Frankfurt, Let's Talk About Sekt, where we really went into the depths, and people were kind of, my God, totally confused.
Yeah, I was at the Wijnbeurs in Mainz, and I was at a masterclass from Caro, and then she was like about the sparkling wines, like okay, we are still working on it. So nobody knows exactly what's happening with the sparkling wine. So
yeah. So that's why I'm trying. I cannot really push them, but I'm telling them you have to move on now. We're talking since 15 years now. The sect bubble is kind of exploding now. The best
yeah,
sect coming out, and it's for
yeah,
me still the visibility and the communication is not in par with the quality, and that's really disappointing, I guess, for many winemakers doing
yeah,
good, excellent jobs.
yeah.
So if we can come back to the slide you got up now, the 3 bottles there's a number of people who've put their guesses on the chat already.
Okay, perfect.
And so the first one, the lowest level of quality, which would be the tank method. If people want to put in the chat now which number bottle, 1, 2, or 3, they think tank method is, we'll take a quick poll on that. Okay, so all the comments so far have put number 2 universally as the tank method.
Well done. Yeah, that's
Okay.
the one, actually. Yes.
So there isn't consensus, though, on which is the top quality between bottles 1 or 3. So let's ask people to say which they think the top quality is. So most people are coming in with number 3. But some people thought number 1 might have been without the foil capsule. Interesting. Is there anyone else who wants to vote? Okay, so I think most people have gone for number 3.
That's quite correct. But the bottle 1 is a very old vintage, and they're doing this new style of leaving the foil neck away. So I was wondering, how much this kind of influences how you judge the wine quality. So it's a good nature, yeah.
Yeah, I think you see quite a lot now in England without the foil capsule. It was one of the few things that the UK government did after we left the EU was to allow sparkling wine producers to omit having to have a foil capsule. I don't think that was the only purpose of Brexit, but that so far is the only difference that I've observed in terms of wine legislation. But it's often used by producers wanting a more modern appearance.
Exactly, but it also changes again the perception. And I could have put in now a non-alcoholic sparkling version as well. It looks the same like bottle 2. And it's even a kind of talked about as sect. And I think that adds even more to the confusion. And that's something I really don't think is a good move. Because legally, it's not allowed to call it a sect anyway, but as we use sect as an overall catching term, it makes it even more difficult, confusing.
Yeah. And now Liz has put a couple of comments and a question in the chat just before we finish. It's now turned 7, but I think that's the last question which you haven't addressed that's been posted. Liz, do you want to ask your question about the labeling requirements?
Well, I was agreeing with Anne on the confusion for consumers, because the most successful sparkling wines, you look at a name and you get an idea of a fairly consistent quality. But does Crémant Sekt have Sekt on the label as well, or just Crémant?
It has actually in the front, it must state in the front Crémant, Moselle, also Mosel, not French, Mosel. And so you see clearly, do I have something here? I have another example. So it really states Crémant, but doesn't really, and the back label, it says maybe Deutscher Sekt, for example. because Hergestellt in Germany is more for the lowest categories. But you see Cremant right away because it's on the front. That's why I didn't put it in, because you recognize Cremant.
Yes, fine. Cremant is obviously recognised as a level of quality, but I think it just adds to the confusion about Sekt, unfortunately, as far as consumers are concerned.
And I think this leads to the last question that Becky Sue posted. Becky, if you want to unmute, but essentially this could be the subject of a whole nother hour webinar, if not a whole week of conferencing, to compare the categories of Austrian Sekt and German Sekt. What are the differences when you compare the classifications and how they've developed? Becky, do you want to phrase that any other way that we can deal with this in the last minute? Is Becky still on?
She is, but I just proceed as.
Okay. So I think essentially, can one do a comparative grid of German to Austrian Sekt in terms of, or are they completely different?
First of all, they have a common history. It's the same thing. Being in Champagne, coming back, and Schlumberger started then his Sektkellerei. So I think overall they had the same problem with the name Sekt because they use it as well. But compared to Germany, they really said, okay, we take the whole industry with it. So with the three-tier system, they really made a good compromise that, with the classic level, so with the entry level, you have all methods in it, tank, whatever, traditional transfer. But if you rise up to the reserve, then already tank is out. And I think that helps a lot if you see a reserve on the bottle. And then you have, the requirements to all the regions and the work rates, similar to Germany, I must say. But they have narrowed it a little bit down better for communication, that you can see some of the differences much better. So the quality, yes.
Thank you very much. So, Nicole, I think we should wrap up now, but we'd love to have you back again and talk more about Austrian Sekt versus German Sekt. Thank you very much indeed. I think everyone's really been very well engaged in tonight's webinar. Thank you.